I think a lot of people, they look and they see what's happened at the end, but they don't see what happened in the mud. They don't see what happened in the mud. They just see the end and they say, oh, this is so great. This is, oh, you're doing this and this and this. But walk a mile in your shoes through these times and then let's see what's great. Let's see if you're able to handle it. Let's see if when everything seems like it's falling apart, are you able to get up and make it happen? Because if you are, you could be royalty also. But if not, you're going to be average. You're going to be average. If you want to be great, if you want to crawl up out of the mud, you got to be willing to fight every step of the way. So after we, while we were searching for a spot and found White Road while we were over at Lundy, we found another spot, but I just couldn't see it working because it didn't have enough parking as I'd had in the past. So we chose White Road, but then when White Road didn't work out, we still had about a month left over at Lundy. So we pursued this spot. And I didn't think even when we moved in here that this could work at the end of a dark kind of mechanic row, and we only had 8 parking spots. What I underestimated is that we were right close to several freeways right here with the 880, the 680, and the 101. And this place actually got super busy. This is where the Lotus really started to take off. We started doing between 400 or 500 people a day over here. And they've turned this into a tire shop now. But at one point, we had 500 people a day coming through here. We invented some new products out of here. We started selling dollar joints. We would get these tubs of shake from the harvest and roll up joints. And we had people who were in the back rolling these up. And actually, I can remember the interview for the job was you needed to be able to roll 100 joints with the roller in an hour. And people would come in, they were able to do that. And those became just so popular. This is where our Bubba cones were invented. We had a bunch of extra Bubba shake and started rolling up these cones and selling them for I think it was 4 for $20, and they were good. They were fat cones. People started coming and buying those. Nobody bothered us right here. This was the first place we were at that, we were welcome. There was mechanics in here, body shop, muffler shop, glass shop, and they just let us do our thing right here. I wanted to stay here forever. I wanted to stay here. When the regulations came into place, they started saying where people could stay, and this is in the right zone, but on the other side of the fence there's a trailer park, and you weren't allowed to be right next to a residential area. So we fought for that, couldn't get it done. The regulations just wouldn't allow us to stay here. And so after 4 or 5 years, we had to start looking for another spot. We had to start looking for another spot that was going to fall within the zoning. At this time, there was about 130 cannabis clubs in San Jose, and they were only going to allow 16 to get licenses. And so everybody was out there looking for pretty much the same locations, which are very hard to find because you have to be in a certain zone, and it was mostly industrial areas. Couldn't be within a certain amount of feet from a school, a park, a library, a drug abuse center. So there were all these restrictions, and then on top of that, you had to find a place that A, was empty and that was for lease, and B, somebody who would lease it to you as a cannabis business. So we searched high and searched low. It was getting to be towards the end where you had to find a spot by a certain day. We were right up against the time on that. I really worried about whether once again we were going to be able to make it through this big milestone, which was the legalization. The city was actually going to issue out licenses as opposed to operating underneath the Prop 215 medicinal model. So it was a big time. They were going to shut down a lot of shops. We only had these 8 parking spots right here. So the way that we figured out how to make it work is we had about 3 parking attendants out here. And so when people would come in, we would shuffle them in and out, in and out, in and out. So I'll show you some stuff outside here. Yeah, so I didn't think this place could work because we didn't have the parking. We got these 8 parking spots over here. And what we did is we ended up getting 3 parking attendants out here that would just keep people moving. And we would do, I think over here by this point, I had, we had about 30 or 40 employees between the people who were bud tenders, the people who were processors, rolling up joints, security guards, front desk, people watching cameras. This is where a lot of products started getting moving. I had a hidden vault in the back. You needed a magnet to open up a wall. Most of the people that worked here never knew that that ever existed. There were people that were in my office hundreds of times and never knew that existed. We had steel on the inside, we had steel caging, we had aluminum, we had all the different metals so that no particular saw could chop through all that at the same time. Very secure. By that time, we were holding 300 or 400 pounds inside this facility. You know, doing a substantial amount of business out of here. All day long, people coming through. All day long, people coming through. You know, this is where things really got really big for the Lotus. Yo, when the regulations came into place, you know, I wanted to stay here. Well, I wanted to stay here because things were going great. We had figured it out and I wanted to stay here, but that RV park on the other side over there is considered residential, and you know, you weren't allowed to be next to residential, so that couldn't work out for us. So we fought for it, didn't work, so we had to start looking for another place. But you know, as mentioned, we were here for 5 years and we were welcomed here. You know, we were welcomed here. Did a lot of business here. Did a lot of business. You know, I can remember one Christmas, you know, everybody else was closed. All the shops were closed in the area, but we were open. And there was a line from this door all the way down. We've never not opened. And through all this that we've talked about, we've opened every morning. We've opened every single morning. If the sun comes up, the Lotus is open. And that's something like 5,500 days when you talk about 15 years. Through all this, we've never closed. We've always been open. And that's a streak that is one of the things I'm most proud of. You know, that's like some Lou Gehrig type shit, you know? That's like some crazy streak. That's taken a lot of resiliency. Boy, that's taken a lot of strength. That's taken a lot of like not willing to quit. That's been a fight. But it's one of the reasons why people, I think, have a load of respect for what we're doing here. You know, it's not easy to be royalty. It's earned. It's earned. And it's not earned easily. I think a lot of people, they look and they see what's happened at the end, but they don't see what happened in the mud. They don't see what happened in the mud. They just see the end and they say, oh, this is so great. This is, oh, you're doing this and this and this. But walk a mile in your shoes through these times and then let's see what's great. Let's see if you're able to handle it. Let's see if when everything seems like it's falling apart, are you able to get up and make it happen? Because if you are, then you could be royalty also. But if not, you're gonna be average. You're gonna be average. You know, if you wanna be great, if you wanna crawl up out of the mud, you gotta be willing to fight every step of the way. So we took off on the search for the next spot. Once again, we're looking for a new home. Looking for a new home. What happened was, you know, when we moved over here, it was actually, we moved on 420 into this building right here. This was our first day open. And we ran a deal. We ran a deal for $42 an eighth because it was 420. Where normally we were charging $50. We ran a deal for $42 an eighth. And it worked so well, we never changed it. It worked so well for the whole time we were here, we sold bud for $42 an eighth. And we got up to where we would have like 30 different types of strains, and we had all sorts of Girl Scout cookies that people loved. OGs, Jack Herrera, all types of bud, and we would weigh it out right in front of you. You know, at this time it was weigh it out right in front of you. This is the place that the infused joint was invented. I had not seen anybody making any infused joints, and we started making dollar joints using these big tubs of shake that we would get from the farms. And then we just took that every which way. We started putting hash in it, and then we started taking and painting on some oil onto it. We started adding keef to them, and so we had dollar joints. We had these $2 joints, $4 joints. You know, we were very creative. We wouldn't just sell a gram of wax. We started selling just a dab. You could come in here and spend $3 and get a small little parchment where you could just go take a dab. You know, and we had all these bundles that was like 3 joints with hash in them and 2 regular joints and a thing of hash, you know, and you could get that for like $20 or something like that. And we started selling so many extracts and so much hash from here, we had to set up our own separate station just for people to buy wax and buy hash because they wanted to look at it for so long. We were very smart since the very beginning in gathering people's information. We always gathered people's email addresses. We always gathered their phone numbers. And so it was always very easy for us to reach our customers. So when we wanted to get it cracking, we would send out a text message to, I think at that time would be 60 or 70,000 people. And, they would come out and it would be us cutting a deal on something for that day. And we would just have these insanely busy days those days. And that built up, a lot of cash for the organization for our next move, because it was going to be really expensive getting licensed and being one of the only 16. I mean, to make it to licensing, to be 16 out of like 130 something shops, everybody's looking for the same location, you're going to have to go the extra mile. You're going to have to do what others don't. You're going to have to do what they won't, and that's exactly what we did. That's exactly what we did.